Tonight, we explore the terrifying possibility that the edge of our universe is not a physical boundary, but a rendering limit in a cosmic architecture that refuses to show us its true face. Every second you sit here, the universe is deleting itself. As you breathe, as your heart beats, 60,000 stars are slipping past a point of no return, crossing a threshold where their light will never reach your eyes again. We are told the universe is expanding, but for us, the reality is much darker. Our world is shrinking. We are being quarantined inside a bubble of light that is closing in on us, leaving us stranded in an ever-growing ocean of silence. We look up at the stars and see a tapestry of infinity. But what if that infinity is an illusion? What if the darkness between the stars isn't empty space but a null value, a place where the code of reality simply hasn't been written yet? We are the prisoners of a horizon that moves as we move, an invisible wall that keeps us trapped in a local neighborhood while the rest of existence screams away from us at speeds that defy the laws of physics. Tonight, we begin our investigation into the ultimate failed escape attempt, following the light to the very end of the world to find out what happens when the projection stops and the screen begins. To understand the edge, we first have to understand the wall. If you were to step outside on the clearest night imaginable and point the most powerful telescope ever built at the emptiest patch of the sky, a sliver of darkness no larger than a single grain of sand held at arm's length, you wouldn't find a void. Instead, you would find a riot of light. You would see 2 trillion galaxies, each teeming with hundreds of billions of stars, stretching back through time. But if you look past the furthest galaxy, past the oldest star, you hit something else. You hit a wall of fire. It is called the cosmic microwave background, or the CMB. To our eyes, the space between galaxies looks black, but that's only because our biological hardware is too primitive to see the truth. If you could tune your vision to the frequency of microwaves, the entire sky would glow with a uniform, ghostly radiance. This is the oldest light in existence, the literal afterglow of the Big Bang, and it forms a perfect sphere around us. It is the surface of last scattering, the moment the universe cooled enough for light to finally break free from the primordial fog. It sits 46.5 billion light-years away in every direction, marking the absolute limit of our vision. But here is where our investigation takes a disturbing turn. When cosmologists look at this wall of light, they don't see a random explosion. They see a miracle of precision that shouldn't exist. This is known as the horizon problem, and it is the first clue that our reality might be structurally artificial. If you look at the CMB on the far left of the sky and the CMB on the far right, they are exactly the same temperature down to 1 part in 100,000. This sounds like a minor detail until you realize those 2 regions are separated by 93 billion light-years. In the standard history of the universe, there has never been enough time for light or information to travel between them. They have never met. They have never talked. So how do they know to be the exact same temperature? It's like walking into a room and finding 2 cups of coffee on opposite sides of the house, both steaming at the exact same degree despite having never touched. In any natural system, this is impossible. It suggests that before the universe expanded, everything we see today was once a single, unified point, a source code that was equilibrated before being projected across the sky. This leads us to a concept that most mainstream documentaries are too afraid to touch, the rendering boundary. In the world of high-end computing, a developer doesn't render an entire game world at once. That would crash the system. Instead, the engine only calculates the parts the player is currently looking at. Everything beyond the horizon is kept in a state of potential until the observer moves closer. When we apply this logic to the universe, the CMB begins to look less like an ancient relic and more like a computational optimization. Beyond that wall of light, space may not physically exist in the way we understand it. It might be waiting to be rendered. This isn't just science fiction, it's a direct response to the flatness problem. We have measured the geometry of the universe with the most precise instruments humanity has ever created, and we found that space is flat to within a 0.5% margin of error. For the universe to be this flat today, the initial conditions at the very first trillionth of a second had to be tuned to a precision of 1 part in 10 to the power of 62. To put that in perspective, imagine trying to balance a pencil on its tip and having it stay there for 13 billion years without a single wobble. If that value had been off by a single decimal point, the universe would have either collapsed into a black hole or shredded itself into a featureless mist before the first atom could form. Why is reality so impossibly precise? Why does the wall of the CMB look so uniform? The traditional answer is cosmic inflation, a brief, violent burst of expansion that smoothed out the wrinkles of space before we could see them. But inflation is a double-edged sword. It solved the math, but it cost us our connection to reality. By stretching the universe by a factor of 10 to the 26th in a fraction of a second, inflation guaranteed that 99% of existence was pushed permanently beyond our reach. This is the core of the observer-dependent frame paradox. We are trapped in a causal bubble, a sphere of influence where things can happen to us. But an observer standing on a galaxy at the edge of our view would see a completely different sphere. Their edge would contain galaxies we will never know exist, and our home, the Milky Way, would look like a tiny, fading dot on their horizon. This suggests that the edge of the universe isn't a place you can travel to. It is a perspective, it is a boundary that follows you like a shadow. And if the edge is just a perspective, we have to ask a terrifying question. If the CMB is the edge of the projection, what is the screen? This is where we encounter the holographic principle. This theory suggests that all of the three-dimensional information of our lives, our planet, our bodies, the very stars themselves, is actually just a projection of two-dimensional data encoded on the surface of the horizon. Think of it like a hologram on a credit card. To your eyes, it looks like a 3D image with depth and texture, but it's actually just a flat piece of plastic. In this framework, the edge of the universe isn't the end of space, it's the location of the data. The reason we can never reach the edge is because we are the edge, viewed from the inside out. Every galaxy we see, every black hole we map, is just a reflection of information sitting on the boundary of our causal bubble, but there is a glitch in the data. If the universe is a perfect projection, it should be smooth, it should be logical. Instead, we find the cold spot, an area of the sky 5 degrees across that is anomalously cold, defying every statistical model of how the universe should look. It is a massive bruise on the CMB, a region that some physicists believe is the site of a cosmic collision where our bubble bumped into another. When we look at this cold spot, we aren't just looking at cold gas. We might be looking at the first structural crack in the screen. It is a hint that the beyond isn't just more empty space, but a seething competitive environment where our reality is just one of many. Humanity has spent centuries trying to find a container for existence. Ancient civilizations put gods behind the clouds. We put quantum fields behind the stars. But every time we move the boundary, we find that the new wall is just as impenetrable as the last. We are living in a fragment of a unified whole that was shattered by inflation, a piece of a map that has been torn away and hidden. The deeper we look, the more it feels like the universe is actively hiding its true scale from us. The physics that allowed us to exist, the inflation that made space flat and stable, is the very same physics that locked us in this room and threw away the key. We are the products of our own ignorance. The wall and the observer were created in the same instant, two sides of the same coin. As we sit here, in the center of our 46 billion light-year sphere, we feel like the masters of all we survey. We map the 2 trillion galaxies and feel as though we are nearing the end of the mystery. But we are like a prisoner who has carefully measured the dimensions of his cell and concluded that he understands the world. He knows the texture of the stone and the thickness of the bars, but he has no concept of the city outside, the continent beyond the city, or the ocean beyond the continent. The most disturbing realization of Chapter 1 is this: the observable universe is not a description of what exists. It is a description of what the physics of space-time permits us to reach. Beyond our rendering boundary, reality continues. It contains 32 sextillion galaxies that we will never see. It contains parallel histories that began just like ours but took different paths. It contains structures so vast they would make a supercluster look like a speck of dust. And yet, despite all our telescopes, all our math and all our ambition, we are drifting further away from the truth every second. Dark energy is pulling the screen taut, stretching the projection until the images begin to blur and fade. We are living in a golden age of visibility, a brief moment in the cosmic timeline where the code is still legible. But the window is closing. If we want to know what really exists beyond the edge, we cannot rely on our eyes. We have to look for the fingerprints the beyond left behind. We have to look at the smudges on the glass, the anomalies in the math, and the terrifying precision of a reality that looks too much like a magic trick to be a coincidence. We have found the first wall. It is made of light. It is 93 billion light-years wide, and it is telling us that we are not alone, but we are definitely being kept in the dark. In the next chapter, we will look at the impossible math that holds this prison together, and the knife-edge precision that suggests our bubble might be more of a laboratory than a home. To understand the true nature of what lies beyond the horizon, we have to stop looking at the stars and start looking at the math. If Chapter 1 showed us the physical wall of light that cages us, Chapter 2 is about the invisible bars of the cage, the impossibly precise equations that allow us to exist at all. There is a value in physics so exact, so hauntingly perfect, that it forces us to confront a terrifying possibility, that our universe is not a natural occurrence, but a finely tuned anomaly. This number is called omega. Omega is the value that describes the total density of the universe and, by extension, its ultimate shape. It is the pulse of reality itself. In the simplest terms, omega is a cosmic tug-of-war between two titanic forces, the outward push of expansion and the inward pull of gravity. If gravity is stronger, omega is greater than 1, and the universe is curved like a ball. If expansion is stronger, omega is less than 1, and the universe is curved like a saddle. But if the two forces are perfectly balanced, omega equals exactly 1. In this scenario, the universe is flat. For decades we tried to measure this value. We sent satellites into the cold dark of space to map the oldest light in existence, searching for the slightest curve in the fabric of reality. When the Planck satellite, the most sophisticated measuring instrument ever built by human hands, returned its final data, the answer it gave was a mathematical miracle. Omega was found to be 1.00 plus or minus a fraction of a percent. Across a sphere 93 billion light-years wide, the universe is flat. This should not just surprise you, it should haunt you. To say the universe is flat sounds like a geometric technicality, but in the language of the cosmos, flatness is not a resting state. It is not something the universe just happens to be. In the equations that govern the evolution of space-time, a value of omega equals 1 is what physicists call an unstable fixed point. Think of it like trying to balance a sharpened pencil on its tip. You might be able to get it to stay for a split second with extraordinary care, but the slightest vibration, a single atom out of place, or a breath of air will send it falling. Once it begins to tilt, the laws of gravity take over, and the deviation accelerates until the pencil hits the table. The universe works exactly like that pencil. If omega had started out even a fraction of a hair away from 1 at the beginning of time, that difference would have grown exponentially as the universe expanded. If there were just a tiny bit too much matter, the pencil would have fallen toward gravity, and the entire universe would have collapsed back in on itself in a big crunch before the first star could even ignite. If there were just a tiny bit too much expansion, the pencil would have fallen the other way, and the universe would have shredded itself into a featureless, cooling mist of gas where atoms could never clump together to form planets or people. We are living in the impossible middle. We are the version of reality where the pencil has remained balanced on its tip for 13.8 billion years without a single wobble. How lucky do you feel today? Because the precision required for this magic trick is beyond anything the human mind is designed to comprehend. To get the flat universe we see today, the initial conditions of the cosmos at the very first moment, the Planck time, a trillionth of a trillionth of a trillionth of a second after the beginning, had to be tuned to a precision of 1 part in 10 to the power of 62. Sit with that number, 10 to the 62nd, that is a 1, followed by 62 zeros. If you were to write that number out on a ribbon of paper, the ribbon would stretch across the solar system. If the density of the universe at its birth had differed from the perfect value by a single decimal point at the 62nd position, the stars would never have formed, the Earth would not exist, you would not be here to wonder why. This is the flatness problem, and it suggests that we are trapped inside a bubble of math so finely tuned that calling it an accident feels like a scientific surrender. Imagine a lottery where the odds of winning are 1 in a trillion. Now imagine winning that lottery every single day for a month. That is still more likely than the universe being this flat by pure chance. When physicists see this kind of precision, they don't see beauty. They see an investigative lead. They see the fingerprints of a mechanism. They begin to wonder if the universe was aimed at this value, or if we are merely the survivors of a cosmic reproductive process that we are only just beginning to understand. This leads us to a disturbing narrative angle that mainstream science often whispers about but rarely shouts: cosmological natural selection. Perhaps our universe isn't a one-off miracle. Perhaps it is a biological organism. In this model, the beyond is not an empty void, but a competitive ecosystem of universes. If a universe is born with the wrong math, if its omega is off, it dies in infancy, either collapsing or dispersing. But universes that land on the knife edge of precision are the ones that survive long enough to produce black holes. And if black holes are actually cosmic reproductive organs that birth daughter universes with slightly mutated laws of physics, then our flat, fine-tuned reality is simply the most successful species in a multiverse of failures. We aren't special because we were chosen. We are here because our math was stable enough to replicate. But there is an even darker implication to this precision. If the math of our universe is so perfectly calibrated, it suggests that reality is not an open-ended frontier, but a closed informational system. This brings us back to the idea of the laboratory universe. When we look at the 1 part in 10 to the 62 precision, it looks less like a natural law and more like a set of initial parameters in a simulation. In any high-level architecture, you don't leave the fundamental constants to chance, you hard-code them. The most unsettling evidence for this hard coding isn't even the flatness of space, It's the energy of the vacuum itself, dark energy. When physicists try to calculate how much energy should be in empty space based on the laws of quantum mechanics, they get a number that is 120 orders of magnitude larger than what we actually observe. This is the cosmological constant problem, and it is widely considered the worst prediction in the history of science. The discrepancy is so vast that it suggests something is deliberately cancelling out the energy of the vacuum, leaving only a tiny, precise residual amount that allows the universe to expand without tearing itself apart. It's as if we are living inside a machine where the pressure is at 1,000,000 pounds per square inch, but a safety valve has been perfectly set to allow only a single gram of force through. Why? Why is the valve set there? Because if it were any higher, the machine would explode. If it were any lower, it wouldn't turn on. We are the beneficiaries of a cosmic Goldilocks zone that extends far beyond the distance of the Earth from the Sun. We are in a Goldilocks zone of the very laws of physics. We are trapped in a bubble of impossibly fine-tuned math, where the beyond is separated from us, not by a wall of light, but by a wall of logic. If you were to step outside this bubble, the very rules that hold your atoms together would cease to function. You would encounter a beyond where the math is broken, where space-time is so curved it loops back on itself in a fraction of an inch, or so flat and empty that the concept of a thing has no meaning. The horror of Chapter 2 is the realization that our edge is a safeguard. The 93 billion light-year sphere we call home is the only region of the infinite fractal where the numbers worked. We look out at the CMB and see a wall of fire, but that fire is the result of the math finally finding its balance. Beyond that wall, the code might be different. There might be regions of the bulk where gravity is a repulsive force, or where there are 11 dimensions of space and none of time. We feel like masters of the universe because we have mapped the 2 trillion galaxies, but we are actually like a group of bacteria living on a single, microscopic grain of dust inside a clean room. We marvel at how clean and ordered our world is, unaware that the only reason we exist is because the rest of the building is a chaotic, uninhabitable construction site. The flatness problem tells us that the universe is locked. It is a structural quarantine. The same precision that gives us the stars also guarantees that we can never truly understand what happened before the magic trick began. Every time we try to look back at the first second of time, the math becomes so extreme that our equations melt. We hit a singularity, a point where the rendering engine of reality simply refuses to provide more data. We are forced to ask, who or what set the value of omega? Was it the result of an infinite number of failed universes finally hitting the jackpot? Is it the byproduct of a biological-like evolution of the cosmos? Or is it the signature of an architect who didn't want the pencil to fall? As we move into the next chapter, we will see how the universe managed to hide this magic trick from us. We will explore the mechanism of cosmic inflation, the violent, spectacular event that took the tiny, balanced pencil and stretched it so wide that we can no longer see the tip. We are about to discover that the edge was created to hide the truth of our isolation, and that the same physics that made life possible was the very thing that hid 99% of reality from us on purpose. We are not just living in a flat universe, we are living in a universe that has been ironed out to hide the wrinkles where the monsters live. To find out what is truly happening at the edge of the world, we have to travel back to a winter night in 1979 to the mind of a young physicist named Alan Guth. Guth wasn't trying to find the edge of the universe. He was trying to solve a clerical error in the laws of physics. He was obsessed with why we hadn't found any magnetic monopoles, heavy, one-poled particles that the standard model insisted should be everywhere, littering the vacuum of space like cosmic dust. But when he looked at the math, he stumbled upon something far more terrifying than a missing particle. He found a mechanism that didn't just explain why the universe was empty, it explained how the universe had been designed to hide itself. He called it a spectacular realization, and it is the moment our understanding of reality changed from an open book to a redacted document. Guth realized that in the first trillionth of a second after the beginning, the universe wasn't just expanding, it was screaming. This was the birth of cosmic inflation. Before this moment, the entire observable universe was smaller than an atomic nucleus. Everything was packed so tightly that every part of it could talk to every other part. They could share heat, share information, and share a common destiny. But then a field of energy, the inflaton field, got stuck. It entered what physicists call a false vacuum, a state of high energy instability, like a ball perched on the edge of a jagged cliff. When that ball finally fell, it released a repulsive force so violent that it shredded the fabric of space-time. In a window of time between 10 to the power of minus 36 and 10 to the power of minus 32 seconds, a span so brief that human concepts of time are essentially meaningless, the universe doubled in size, then doubled again and again and again, repeating this process nearly 100 times. If you took a single atom and inflated it at this rate, it would become larger than the entire observable universe in the blink of an eye. This wasn't the Big Bang as you were taught it in school. The Big Bang wasn't the beginning, it was the thermalization of this energy, the moment the screaming stopped and the energy of the field was dumped into the particles that became us. But here is the twist that creates the wall we see today. Inflation was a double-edged sword. It solved the flatness problem and the horizon problem we discussed earlier, but it did so through a process of structural concealment. By stretching space by a factor of at least 10 to the 26th, and likely much, much more, inflation smoothed out every wrinkle, every mountain, and every jagged edge of the primordial cosmos. It took the messy, chaotic debris of the beginning and ironed it flat, creating the stable, balanced geometry that allows stars to form and life to breathe. In short, the same physics that made your existence possible is the exact same physics that guaranteed you would never see 99% of what actually exists. Think of a balloon that has been scribbled on with a felt-tip pen. When the balloon is deflated, the marks are thick, dark, and close together. You can see the whole picture. But if you inflate that balloon to the size of a planet in a fraction of a second, the marks are stretched so thin they become invisible. They are still there, but they are pushed far beyond your horizon. This is our reality. We are living on a tiny, smooth patch of a balloon that is so gargantuan we can only see a microscopic fraction of its surface. This leads us to a haunting realization. The first wall, the cosmic microwave background, isn't the end of the universe. It is the scar of this shattering. It is the limit of how far we can see before the stretching became too fast for light to keep up. When we look at that wall of fire, we are looking at the moment the code of our local bubble was finalized. Beyond it, the universe continues, but it is a universe we are structurally forbidden from ever visiting. Mainstream cosmology often treats the observable universe as the total universe, but if you take Alan Guth's realization seriously, that is a lie of omission. Modern calculations, including the 2011 Bayesian analysis by Vardanian, Trotter, and Silk, suggest that the actual universe must be at least 251 times larger than the sphere we can see, and that is the conservative minimum estimate. In reality, it is likely millions, if not billions, of times larger. It contains at least 32 sextillion galaxies that are invisible to us, not because our telescopes aren't strong enough, but because the space between us and them is being created faster than the light can travel. Inflation didn't just expand space, it fragmented reality. It took a single, unified source code and tore it into a trillion pieces, throwing those pieces into an ever-expanding ocean of inflation where they can never find each other again. We are a fragment of a map that has been ripped away from the atlas. This brings us to the failed escape attempt. If you were to board a ship and travel at the speed of light toward the edge of your horizon, you would never reach it. As you move, the stretching of inflation is still happening in the distance. The horizon would stay exactly the same distance away from you, mocking your progress. You are like a man trying to reach the end of a treadmill that is being lengthened at the speed of light as he runs. The physics of inflation didn't just create our world, it built the prison walls and ensured they were made of the one thing we can never break, the geometry of space itself. But why? Why would nature require such a violent concealing event? Some theorists suggest that inflation is a filter. It is a mechanism that dilutes the monsters of the early universe. If inflation hadn't happened, the universe today would be a chaotic, uninhabitable mess of magnetic monopoles, jagged spatial defects, and lethal energy densities. It would be a broken universe. By inflating, the cosmos performed a massive cleanup operation, pushing all the defects and the chaos into the beyond, leaving our local pocket clean, flat, and quiet. We live in the clean room of the cosmos. We marvel at the order, the symmetry, and the fine-tuning of our laws, unaware that the only reason we have this order is because all the entropy and the broken code were dumped over the horizon. The beyond isn't just more space, it is the dumping ground for the cosmic architecture that didn't work. It is where the wrinkles of the 10 to the power of 62 precision were hidden. And here is the most disturbing implication of Guth's spectacular realization. If inflation can happen once, it can happen forever. This is the theory of eternal inflation. While inflation ended in our local bubble, reheating the vacuum into the Big Bang, the field itself is still screaming in the spaces between the bubbles. Our first wall is just the interior boundary of a single pocket in a seething infinite foam. Asking what is beyond the edge is like a bubble in a boiling pot of water, asking what lies beyond its surface. The answer isn't more water. The answer is a chaotic, energetic process of phase transitions where new bubbles are being born and dying every second. Beyond our edge is not a void. It is a reproductive factory of infinities where the laws of physics might be mutated versions of our own. The first wall is our protection, but it is also our blindfold. It is the mechanism that hid reality on purpose to allow a stable, low-energy environment where life could eventually evolve to ask these questions. We are the products of a cosmic redaction. We see the CMB and we think we see the beginning of time, but we are really just seeing the back of the curtain. As we sit in our center, measuring our 2 trillion galaxies, we must remember the lesson of the winter of 1979. The universe is not what it appears to be. It is a carefully filtered projection, ironed flat by a force of unimaginable violence and quarantined behind a wall of causality that we can never cross. We are the survivors of a cosmic shredding, living in the only shard where the numbers happen to balance. But if we are in a pocket, and that pocket was created by a field that is still expanding elsewhere, what happens when 2 of these bubbles collide? What happens when the wall we think is impenetrable is bruised by something from the outside? In the next chapter, we will look at the 4 fake horizons that keep us trapped, and the shrinking window of time we have left to look at the light before the universe finishes deleting itself. We are living in a cosmically fortunate moment, but as we are about to see, the door is already beginning to close. We have spent our history looking up and assuming that the more time passes, the more of the universe we will see. We imagined that as the centuries ticked by, light from the deep beyond would finally reach us, unveiling the secrets of the infinite. But the physics of an accelerating universe has a cruel punchline. The window is not opening, it is slamming shut. We are living through a massive, silent deletion of reality. Every single second you have been listening to me, 60,000 stars have slipped past an invisible point of no return. They haven't died, and they haven't moved in the traditional sense. They have simply been pushed by the expansion of space-time into a region of the cosmos where their light can never, ever reach your eyes again. We are the witnesses to a cosmic sunset that will eventually leave us in total, absolute darkness. To understand why this is happening, we have to look at the 4 fake horizons that define our prison. Most people think there is just one edge to the universe, but there are actually 4 distinct boundaries, each one a different layer of our isolation. The first is the one we think we know, the particle horizon. This is the boundary of the observable universe, sitting roughly 46.5 billion light-years away in every direction. It marks the farthest distance from which any signal, any photon, any neutrino, any gravitational wave could have reached us since the beginning of time. It is a record of the past. When we look at the particle horizon, we aren't looking at what is there now. We are looking at the ghosts of where things were 13 billion years ago. It is the limit of our sight, but it is not the limit of our reach. This leads us to the second, more haunting boundary, the Hubble sphere. This is a mathematical line in the sand, currently sitting about 14.5 billion light-years away. Within this sphere, space is expanding, but it is expanding slower than the speed of light. Outside this sphere, however, the very fabric of space-time is receding from us faster than light itself. This doesn't violate Einstein's rules, because nothing is moving through space faster than light. It is the space itself that is stretching. If you were to point a laser at a galaxy outside the Hubble sphere today, that light would never reach it. The gap between you and that galaxy is being created faster than your light can cross it. You are like a swimmer trying to reach a shore that is being pulled away by a tide that is faster than your maximum speed. You can see the shore, but you are structurally forbidden from ever touching it. But the most terrifying of these boundaries is the third one, the cosmic event horizon. This is the ultimate point of no return. Sitting roughly 16 billion light-years away, it represents the absolute limit of our influence. This is the boundary of our will. Anything that exists beyond this horizon today is permanently and irrevocably cut off from our future. We can see these galaxies in our telescopes. We can map their stars and study their chemistry, but we can never visit them. We can never send them a message. They are the living dead of the cosmos. We are watching ghost images of worlds that have already slipped out of our causal grasp. As the universe expands, more and more of the particle horizon is being swallowed by the event horizon. We are seeing galaxies that we can never interact with, a cruel cosmic tease that shows us exactly what we have already lost. Finally, there is the fourth horizon, the future visibility limit. This is the absolute maximum amount of the universe that we will ever be allowed to know. Currently estimated at around 62 billion light-years in co-moving distance, it represents the boundary of all photons currently in transit that will ever manage to arrive at Earth. Once the last of these photons hits our telescopes, the beyond will become truly, finally silent. There will be no more new information, no more new galaxies. The book will be finished, and the remaining pages will be blank. The reason these horizons are closing in on us is the same mystery that won the Nobel Prize in 1998, dark energy. For most of human history, we thought gravity would eventually slow the expansion of the universe down, perhaps even pulling it back into a big crunch. But when we looked at the light from distant Type 1 as supernovas, we found the opposite. The expansion isn't slowing down, it's accelerating. Something is pressing the gas pedal on the geometry of spacetime, stretching the projection of our reality until the images begin to blur and fade. This creates what we call the shrinking window. In any other era of the universe, the story would be different. If we had evolved 10 billion years earlier, the sky would have been crowded with galaxies, so close they would have merged into a riot of light. If we evolve trillions of years later, the sky will be empty. Because of the acceleration of dark energy, every galaxy not gravitationally bound to our own Milky Way is being hauled away into the darkness. In about 2 trillion years, the expansion will have pushed every other galaxy beyond our event horizon. Imagine an astronomer living on a planet orbiting a star in that distant future. They will look up at the night sky and see nothing but the stars of their own local galaxy. They will build telescopes 1,000 times more powerful than the James Webb, and they will point them at the deepest, darkest patches of the sky, and they will find absolute silence. To them, the universe will seem static and eternal, and they will have no way to know about the Big Bang. They will have no way to see the cosmic microwave background. The evidence of our origin will have been deleted by the very expansion that created it. They will live in a universe of one, convinced that their tiny island of stars is the entirety of existence. This is why we are living in a cosmically fortunate moment. We are the only generation of observers who get to see the truth. We arrived late enough that the universe had time to form complex structures and life, but early enough that the evidence of the beyond hasn't been completely erased yet. We are standing on a bridge between the beginning of time and the end of visibility. We can still see the CMB, the first wall, and we can still measure the magic trick of the flat geometry. But the clock is ticking. Every second those 60,000 stars are being deleted. The code of the universe is being scrubbed of its history, one galaxy at a time. This realization changes the entire emotional weight of the question, what exists beyond the edge? The beyond is no longer a distant frontier we might one day explore. It is a graveyard of everything we have already lost. Most of the universe is already gone. 94% of the galaxies we can see in our most powerful deep-field images are already unreachable. They are already beyond the Hubble sphere. We are looking at a photo album of a world we can never return to. We feel like the masters of all we survey because we have mapped 2 trillion galaxies, but we are actually like passengers on a sinking ship, marveling at the beauty of the ocean as the water rises above the portholes. Our observable bubble is a luxury that is being revoked. The same physics that smoothed the universe out through inflation, the same physics that gave us the knife-edge precision of omega, is now using dark energy to finish the job. It is as if the universe is tired of being observed. It is retreating into itself, pulling the curtains shut and turning out the lights. The fake horizons are the bars of our cage. They allow us to see the vastness of the beyond, just enough to understand our own insignificance, but they prevent us from ever crossing the threshold. We are the prisoners of a light-speed limit in a space-time that refuses to stay still. And as we sit here, in the golden age of visibility, we have to ask, if the universe is deleting its own history, what is it trying to hide? Is the acceleration of dark energy a natural decay, or is it a deliberate quarantine designed to ensure that bubble universes can never interact? The shrinking window implies that our time as cosmic witnesses is limited. We are the only ones who can see the collision scars and the cold spots that hint at other realities. In 1 trillion years, those clues will be gone. The beyond will be a theoretical concept with no observational proof. We are the only ones who get to know that we are part of something larger. But as the window closes, we are noticing something strange. The galaxies aren't just moving away randomly, they seem to be being pulled. Beyond the edge of our visibility, something massive is lurking, exerting a gravitational tug that defies our current models. It is a phenomenon called dark flow, and it suggests that even as the universe tries to delete itself, something from the outside is still reaching in. In the next chapter, we will move beyond the 3D space of our prison and into the multidimensional ocean, where our universe is just one sheet of reality floating in a higher dimensional sea, and where the Big Bang was just a ripple in a much larger and much more dangerous pond. We have spent our entire history trying to move forward, backward, left, right, up, and down, believing that these 3 dimensions are the total sum of the stage upon which the drama of existence plays out. We looked at the cosmic microwave background and saw a wall. We looked at the expansion of space and saw a prison. We looked at the math of omega and saw a balancing act so precarious it felt like a trap. But what if the reason we can't find the outside of our universe is because we are looking in the wrong direction? What if the beyond isn't a distance measured in trillions of light years, but a distance of less than a millimeter, hidden in a direction we lack the biological hardware to perceive? Tonight, we step off the map of 3D space and enter the bulk, a multi-dimensional ocean of infinite depth where our entire universe is nothing more than a thin, vibrating membrane floating in the dark. In mainstream science, we are taught that the Big Bang was the beginning of everything, a single point of infinite density that exploded, creating time and space where there was once nothing. But in the framework of brain cosmology, derived from the most advanced iterations of string theory, the Big Bang loses its status as the ultimate origin. Instead, it becomes something much more localized and, in some ways, much more violent, a collision. Imagine for a moment that our entire reality, every galaxy you've ever seen, every star James Webb has ever photographed, every atom in your body, is a 2-dimensional sheet of paper. To a creature living on that paper, the universe is just the flat surface. They can move left, right, forward, and back, but they have no concept of up or down. Now imagine another sheet of paper hovering just a fraction of an inch above the first. These 2 sheets are what physicists call branes or membranes. They are separate worlds, separate histories, perhaps even governed by separate laws of physics. As these 2 sheets drift through a higher dimensional space called the bulk, they occasionally ripple, they fluctuate, and eventually they touch. When 2 branes collide in the bulk, the energy released is so cataclysmic that it creates a localized reheating event on the surface of the membranes. To the inhabitants of those sheets, it looks like a Big Bang. It looks like space and time were suddenly birthed out of a singular point. But from the perspective of the bulk, it was just a cosmic clap, a momentary intersection of 2 much larger structures. In this model, the beyond isn't an empty void. It is a crowded, multidimensional sea where entire universes drift like ghosts, passing through each other in higher dimensions we cannot see. This changes the entire narrative of our investigation. If our universe is a brain, then the edge we have been hunting is simply the physical limit of our 3D sheet. We are like shadows cast upon a wall. A shadow has no depth. It cannot reach out into the room. It is forever pinned to the surface of the masonry. We are pinned to the 3 dimensions of our brain, while the true reality, the bulk, contains dimensions we can barely even theorize. This leads to the most unsettling mystery of brain cosmology, the proximity of the outside. If the bulk exists, then the edge of the universe is everywhere. It is in the space between your fingers. It is inside the core of every star. There could be an entire alien civilization, a parallel history of Earth, or a seething ocean of antimatter, sitting just a fraction of a millimeter away from your face, separated from you only by the fact that they are on a different brain. You might ask, if they are that close, why can't we see them? Why can't we feel them? The answer lies in the fundamental forces of nature. We are made of light and matter, forces like electromagnetism and the strong and weak nuclear forces. But according to brain theory, these forces are sticky. They are tied to the membrane. Photons, the particles of light, cannot leave the 3D sheet. They are like water droplets trapped on the surface of a pond. They can ripple across the surface, but they cannot jump out into the air. This is why we see the first wall of the CMB. It is the limit of where light can travel on our specific sheet. But there is one force that is not sticky. There is one force that is slippery enough to leak off our brain and into the bulk: gravity. This explains one of the greatest clues in our detective case: the dark matter problem. For decades, we have known that galaxies are being held together by a massive amount of invisible mass that we cannot detect with any telescope. We call it dark matter, but we have no idea what it is. In the framework of brain cosmology, dark matter might not be matter at all. It might be the gravitational shadow of another universe sitting right next to ours in the bulk. We can feel the pull of their galaxies, their stars, and their black holes leaking across the higher dimensional gap. But because their light is trapped on their sheet and ours is trapped on ours, we will never see them. We are feeling the footsteps of a neighbor through a wall we didn't know existed. This is the disturbing implication of dark flow that we touched on in the previous chapter. We see hundreds of galaxy clusters drifting toward a specific point at the edge of our horizon, pulled by something massive that shouldn't be there. Mainstream science struggles to explain it, but brain cosmology offers a terrifyingly simple answer. We are being tugged by the gravity of a neighboring universe that is currently too close in the bulk. We are drifting toward a collision we cannot see coming. The psychological horror of this realization is that it renders our entire concept of scale meaningless. We measure the 93 billion light-year diameter of our bubble and feel as though we have mapped the kingdom. But if we are just a sheet in the bulk, we are essentially zero-dimensional compared to the beyond. We are a flat photograph in a 10-dimensional library. Advanced civilizations, the sources suggest, might not even bother with the failed escape attempt of light-speed travel. They wouldn't try to cross the trillions of miles of empty space to reach a distant star. Instead, they would look sideways. They would develop technology to uncouple from our brain and step directly into the bulk, traveling the fraction of a millimeter required to enter a neighboring reality. To us, they would simply vanish, deleting themselves from our 3D grid and reappearing in a world where the laws of physics might allow for faster-than-light travel, or where the rendering limit of the CMB doesn't exist. But for us, trapped on this membrane, the bulk remains a multidimensional ocean of terrifying mystery. We are like sailors on a raft who have spent their lives measuring the wood and the ropes, only to realize they are floating on a sea that is infinitely deep and filled with other rafts. Some of those rafts might be identical to ours, others might be mutated versions where atoms can't form, or where gravity is a repulsive force that shreds anything that touches it. The mystery of the Big Bang collision, the ekpyrotic model, suggests that our history is cyclic. If brains can collide once, they can collide again. The expansion of our universe, driven by the dark energy we discussed in Chapter 4, might actually be the result of our brain being pulled back toward another collision. The Big Bang was the clap that started our clock, and the eventual Big Crunch, or Big Rip, might just be the moment our brain is folded, torn, or smashed into a neighbor once more, resetting the entropy and starting the projection over from scratch. We are living in a fragment of a unified whole that was shattered not just by inflation, but by the very geometry of the dimensions themselves. We look at the 4 fake horizons and feel the walls closing in, unaware that the exit was never at the edge of space. The exit is up. But as long as we are made of the sticky matter of this brain, we are effectively grounded. Every time we move the boundary of the beyond, we find that we are just uncovering a larger container. We found the solar system, then the galaxy, then the observable bubble, and now we find the bulk. But the pattern remains the same. Every answer is just a more sophisticated prison wall. If our universe is a sheet in an ocean, what contains the ocean? If the ocean is the bulk, what is the shore upon which the bulk breaks? The multidimensional ocean is the 5th layer of our investigation, and it is the most humbling. It tells us that the edge isn't just a distance, it's a limit of our very being. We are 3-dimensional ghosts haunting a higher dimensional world, trying to measure the depth of the sea by looking at the ripples on the surface. As we move into the next chapter, we will leave the chaotic ocean of the bulk behind and look at a different kind of geometry, one that suggests the universe isn't a sheet but a loop. We will explore the infinite mirror, where if you travel far enough in any direction, you don't hit a wall of fire or a higher dimension. You hit the back of your own head. We are about to discover the Pac-Man universe, where the ultimate secret of the beyond is that there is no beyond at all. Only the terrifying realization that we are trapped in a house of mirrors where every exit leads right back to the beginning. We have spent our entire history trying to move forward, backward, left, right, up, and down, believing that these 3 dimensions are the total sum of the stage upon which the drama of existence plays out. We looked at the cosmic microwave background and saw a wall. We looked at the expansion of space and saw a prison. We looked at the math of omega and saw balancing acts so precarious it felt like a trap. But what if the reason we can't find the outside of our universe is because we are looking in the wrong direction? What if the beyond isn't a distance measured in trillions of light years, but a distance of less than a millimeter, hidden in a direction we lack the biological hardware to perceive? Tonight, we step off the map of 3D space and enter the bulk, a multi-dimensional ocean of infinite depth where our entire universe is nothing more than a thin, vibrating membrane floating in the dark. In mainstream science, we are taught that the Big Bang was the beginning of everything, a single point of infinite density that exploded, creating time and space where there was once nothing. But in the framework of brain cosmology, derived from the most advanced iterations of string theory, the Big Bang loses its status as the ultimate origin. Instead, it becomes something much more localized, and in some ways, much more violent, a collision. Imagine for a moment that our entire reality, every galaxy you've ever seen, every star James Webb has ever photographed, every atom in your body, is a 2-dimensional sheet of paper. To a creature living on that paper, the universe is just the flat surface. They can move left, right, forward and back, but they have no concept of up or down. Now imagine another sheet of paper hovering just a fraction of an inch above the first. These 2 sheets are what physicists call branes, or membranes. They are separate worlds, separate histories, perhaps even governed by separate laws of physics. As these 2 sheets drift through a higher dimensional space called the bulk, they occasionally ripple, they fluctuate, and eventually they touch. When two brains collide in the bulk, the energy released is so cataclysmic that it creates a localized reheating event on the surface of the membranes. To the inhabitants of those sheets, it looks like a big bang. It looks like space and time were suddenly birthed out of a singular point. But from the perspective of the bulk, it was just a cosmic clap, a momentary intersection of two much larger structures. In this model, the beyond isn't an empty void. It is a crowded multidimensional sea where entire universes drift like ghosts, passing through each other in higher dimensions we cannot see. This changes the entire narrative of our investigation. If our universe is a brain, then the edge we have been hunting is simply the physical limit of our 3D sheet. We are like shadows cast upon a wall. A shadow has no depth. It cannot reach out into the room. It is forever pinned to the surface of the masonry. We are pinned to the 3 dimensions of our brain, while the true reality, the bulk, contains dimensions we can barely even theorize. This leads to the most unsettling mystery of brain cosmology, the proximity of the outside. If the bulk exists, then the edge of the universe is everywhere. It is in the space between your fingers. It is inside the core of every star. There could be an entire alien civilization, a parallel history of Earth, or a seething ocean of antimatter, sitting just a fraction of a millimeter away from your face, separated from you only by the fact that they are on a different brain. You might ask, if they are that close, why can't we see them? Why can't we feel them? The answer lies in the fundamental forces of nature. We are made of light and matter, forces like electromagnetism and the strong and weak nuclear forces. But according to brain theory, these forces are sticky. They are tied to the membrane. Photons, the particles of light, cannot leave the 3D sheet. They are like water droplets trapped on the surface of a pond. They can ripple across the surface, but they cannot jump out into the air. This is why we see the first wall of the CMB. It is the limit of where light can travel on our specific sheet. But there is one force that is not sticky. There is one force that is slippery enough to leak off our brain and into the bulk: gravity. This explains one of the greatest clues in our detective case, the dark matter problem. For decades, we have known that galaxies are being held together by a massive amount of invisible mass that we cannot detect with any telescope. We call it dark matter, but we have no idea what it is. In the framework of brain cosmology, dark matter might not be matter at all. It might be the gravitational shadow of another universe sitting right next to ours in the bulk. We can feel the pull of their galaxies, their stars, and their black holes leaking across the higher dimensional gap, but because their light is trapped on their sheet and ours is trapped on ours, we will never see them. We are feeling the footsteps of a neighbor through a wall we didn't know existed. This is the disturbing implication of dark flow that we touched on in the previous chapter. We see hundreds of galaxy clusters drifting toward a specific point at the edge of our horizon, pulled by something massive that shouldn't be there. Mainstream science struggles to explain it, but brain cosmology offers a terrifyingly simple answer. We are being tugged by the gravity of a neighboring universe that is currently too close in the bulk. We are drifting toward a collision we cannot see coming. The psychological horror of this realization is that it renders our entire concept of scale meaningless. We measure the 93 billion light-year diameter of our bubble and feel as though we have mapped the kingdom, but if we are just a sheet in the bulk, we are essentially zero-dimensional compared to the beyond. We are a flat photograph in a 10-dimensional library. Advanced civilizations, the sources suggest, might not even bother with the failed escape attempt of light-speed travel. They wouldn't try to cross the trillions of miles of empty space to reach a distant star. Instead, they would look sideways. They would develop technology to uncouple from our brain and step directly into the bulk, traveling the fraction of a millimeter required to enter a neighboring reality. To us, they would simply vanish, deleting themselves from our 3D grid and reappearing in a world where the laws of physics might allow for faster-than-light travel, or where the rendering limit of the CMB doesn't exist. But for us, trapped on this membrane, the bulk remains a multi-dimensional ocean of terrifying mystery. We are like sailors on a raft who have spent their lives measuring the wood and the ropes, only to realize they are floating on a sea that is infinitely deep and filled with other rafts. Some of those rafts might be identical to ours, others might be mutated versions where atoms can't form, or where gravity is a repulsive force that shreds anything that touches it. The mystery of the Big Bang collision, the ekpyrotic model, suggests that our history is cyclic. If brains can collide once, they can collide again. The expansion of our universe, driven by the dark energy we discussed in Chapter 4, might actually be the result of our brain being pulled back toward another collision. The Big Bang was the clap that started our clock, and the eventual Big Crunch, or Big Rip, might just be the moment our brain is folded, torn, or smashed into a neighbor once more, resetting the entropy and starting the projection over from scratch. We are living in a fragment of a unified whole that was shattered not just by inflation, but by the very geometry of the dimensions themselves. We look at the 4 fake horizons and feel the walls closing in, unaware that the exit was never at the edge of space. The exit is up. But as long as we are made of the sticky matter of this brain, we are effectively grounded. Every time we move the boundary of the beyond, we find that we are just uncovering a larger container. We found the solar system, then the galaxy, then the observable bubble, and now we find the bulk. But the pattern remains the same. Every answer is just a more sophisticated prison wall. If our universe is a sheet in an ocean, what contains the ocean? If the ocean is the bulk, what is the shore upon which the bulk breaks? The multidimensional ocean is the 5th layer of our investigation, and it is the most humbling. It tells us that the edge isn't just a distance, it's a limit of our very being. We are 3-dimensional ghosts haunting a higher dimensional world, trying to measure the depth of the sea by looking at the ripples on the surface. As we move into the next chapter, we will leave the chaotic ocean of the bulk behind and look at a different kind of geometry, one that suggests the universe isn't a sheet, but a loop. We will explore the infinite mirror, where if you travel far enough in any direction, you don't hit a wall of fire or a higher dimension, you hit the back of your own head. We are about to discover the Pac-Man universe, where the ultimate secret of the beyond is that there is no beyond at all. Only the terrifying realization that we are trapped in a house of mirrors where every exit leads right back to the beginning. We have spent our journey measuring the bars of our cage, mapping the loop of the infinite mirror, and staring at the wall of light that separates us from the absolute. But to truly understand what exists beyond the edge, we have to let go of the idea that our universe is a singular, finished event. We have been taught to look at the Big Bang as the beginning of time and space, a one-off miracle that birthed everything we know. But the mathematics of cosmic inflation, the very same math that explained our flatness and our uniformity, tells a much more violent and unsettling story. Our Big Bang was not the beginning of the universe, it was the ending of a much larger, more chaotic process. We are living in a local pocket of stability, a tiny clearing in a primordial forest that has been burning since before time began. Tonight, we step into the eternal foam. To visualize the true scale of the beyond, we must return to the mechanism of the inflaton field. As we discussed earlier, this field is what drove the exponential expansion of the early universe. It is a field of energy that, when stuck in a state called a false vacuum, exerts a repulsive force so immense it shreds the fabric of spacetime. In our local neighborhood, this field eventually fell down its potential hill, releasing its energy into the particles and light that became us. We call this reheating, and it is the moment our clock started. We thought the screaming had stopped, but according to the theory of eternal inflation, the screaming never stops. Think of the inflaton field as a ball rolling down a gently sloping hill. As it rolls, it drives expansion. When it hits the bottom, inflation ends and a universe is born. This is the classical view, but quantum mechanics introduces a catastrophic variable, fluctuations. In the quantum world, the ball isn't just rolling, it is being constantly, randomly nudged by the uncertainty of reality itself. Most of the time, these nudges are small, but in an inflating universe where space is doubling in size every fraction of a second, even the rarest events become inevitable. In some regions of space, these quantum kicks don't push the ball down the hill, they push it back up. In these regions, inflation is refreshed, it is renewed, it is made eternal, because inflation creates new space faster than it can decay into ordinary universes. The volume of inflating space grows exponentially forever. Inflation is always ending somewhere, and it is always beginning somewhere else. Our 93 billion light-year sphere, with its 2 trillion galaxies and its knife-edge precision, is not the universe. It is merely a single bubble in a seething infinite foam of pocket universes, each one a local exit from an eternal inflationary background. Asking what is beyond the edge is like a bubble in a boiling pot of water, asking what lies beyond its surface. The answer is not a void. The answer is the bulk we explored in the higher dimensions, but viewed through the lens of a reproductive factory. Beyond our horizon, the inflaton field is still expanding at speeds that defy human comprehension, constantly carving off new big bangs in every direction. We are not the masters of a singular creation. We are a rounding error in a self-reproducing ecosystem of infinities. But here is where the beyond becomes genuinely terrifying. In each of these pocket universes, the laws of physics are not necessarily the same as ours. This is the string theory landscape, a mathematical terrain that contains at least 10 to the power of 500 possible vacuum states. When a bubble nucleates and reheats, the energy of the inflaton field is deposited into whatever physical constants happen to be available in that specific region. Imagine a universe sitting just past our horizon where the strong nuclear force is just a fraction of a percent weaker. In that bubble, atoms can't form. The protons and neutrons would simply drift apart, unable to bind. It is a universe of featureless cooling mist where the concept of a thing is physically impossible. Imagine another bubble where gravity is a repulsive force, or where there are 5 dimensions of space and 2 of time. There are bubbles where light travels at the speed of a walking human, and bubbles where the electromagnetic force is so powerful that a single atom would have the mass of a planet. We look at our Goldilocks constants, the perfect mass of the electron, the precise strength of gravity, and we feel as though we were chosen. But in the eternal foam, we realize that we are merely the survivors of a cosmic lottery. For every bubble like ours that supports complexity and consciousness, there are 10 to the 500th power bubbles that are broken. They are the cosmic garbage of a reproductive process that doesn't care about life. They are lethal, featureless, or chaotic, drifting in the inflationary sea like stillborn stars. This changes the entire emotional weight of our investigation. The beyond is not just more space, it is a graveyard of failed physics. It is an ocean of mutated realities that we are structurally forbidden from ever visiting. Even if we could break the speed of light, we could never reach a neighboring bubble. The space between us is inflating so fast that the distance between bubbles grows faster than any signal could ever travel. We are being quarantined by the geometry of the foam itself, ensuring that the broken math of one bubble can never infect the stable math of another. And yet, the quarantine is not perfect. This leads us to the observer-dependent frame paradox. From the inside of our bubble, our universe looks and feels infinite. Inflation smoothed the floor and hid the edges, and the light from our Big Bang is all we have ever known. But from an external perspective, from the vantage point of the inflationary field itself, our universe is a finite, expanding sphere with a clear beginning and a clear edge. Our infinity is a perspective, a hallucination created by the fact that we are trapped inside the bubble's interior geometry. We are like characters in a video game who have finally reached the edge of the map, only to find that the infinite ocean at the boundary is just a looping texture. We think we are exploring the vastness of the bulk, but we are really just staring at the internal walls of a single cell in a cosmic lattice. The horror of the eternal foam is the realization that individuality, not just of people, but of entire universes, is an illusion. If inflation is eternal, then every possible configuration of matter and energy must repeat. Somewhere in the foam, there is another bubble identical to ours. There is another Milky Way, another Earth, and another version of you, sitting in the same chair, watching the same screen, wondering about the same edge. In fact, there are infinitely many of you, and there are infinitely many versions of you where one single choice was different. There is a version of this history where the Roman Empire never fell, and a version where the first fish never crawled onto land. In an infinite structure, uniqueness becomes a mathematical impossibility. Your life, your struggles, and the very existence of our species are being played out in an infinite number of parallel theatres, most of which are currently slipping past their own event horizons. This brings us back to the failed escape attempt. We wanted to reach the edge to find out what was outside, but the deeper we go into the foam, the more we realize that outside is a linguistically meaningless term. If you step outside the bubble, you enter the inflating field. If you survive the inflating field, you hit another bubble. If you zoom out from the bubbles, you see the foam. If you zoom out from the foam, you see a larger fractal structure that some physicists call the meta-universe. Every time we find a container, we find that the container is itself inside a larger jar. The eternal foam is the ultimate expression of our isolation. It tells us that we are part of a self-sustaining reproductive factory of realities that has no need for an observer. We are the byproduct of a phase transition, a bit of cooling in a field that is still white-hot and screaming in the beyond. Our entire history, from the first atom to the last black hole, is just a momentary flicker in the life of a single bubble. But if we are in a bubble, and there are other bubbles nearby, then the quarantine might have a crack. The seething foam is not a static place, it is a violent one. Bubbles can drift, bubbles can expand into each other, and when they do, they leave a mark, they leave a bruise. Mainstream science tells us the cosmic microwave background is a smooth afterglow, but as we look closer at the first wall, we are starting to see features that the standard model can't explain. We see the cold spot, that anomalously frigid region of the sky that defies all statistical probability. We see the axis of evil, an alignment of the universe's largest structures that points in a direction it shouldn't. These aren't errors in the data. They are the collision scars of the eternal foam. They are the fingerprints of other bubbles that bumped into ours in the first fraction of a second before inflation pushed them permanently away. We are looking at the bruises from our birth, the evidence that we were once part of a crowded, competitive environment before we were cast out into our current loneliness. As we sit here in our cosmically fortunate moment, we are the only ones who can still see these scars. In 1 trillion years, as dark energy continues to stretch our bubble, even these clues will be deleted. The beyond will be a theoretical myth, but tonight we have the math, we have the light, and we have the terrifying realization that our edge is just the skin of a single drop of water in an infinite, boiling ocean. In the next chapter, we will move from the theory of the foam to the physical evidence of the collision. We will investigate the scars of collision, the anomalies at the edge of the sky that prove we are not alone and that something massive and alien is still reaching in from the other side, pulling our galaxies toward a destination we were never meant to see. We have found the foam. Now it's time to look at the bruises. We have spent our journey treating the universe as a pristine, if isolated, laboratory. We have marveled at the magic trick of its flatness, the knife-edge precision of its math, and the way cosmic inflation ironed out the wrinkles to create a smooth, habitable stage for our lives. We looked at the cosmic microwave background and saw a perfect, uniform wall of fire. But as our instruments have grown sharper, we have begun to notice that the wall is not as perfect as we were told. There are marks on the glass, there are anomalies in the data that shouldn't be there, features so large and so strange that they defy every statistical model of a random, isolated beginning. Tonight we must confront the possibility that our universe is not a virgin birth, it is a battered survivor. We are going to look at the scars of collision, the physical bruises left on the fabric of our reality from a time when our bubble bumped into another in the seething foam of the eternal beyond. To understand these scars, we have to return to the most studied object in human history, the cosmic microwave background, or the CMB. For decades, the consensus was that the CMB was isotropic, meaning it looks the same in every direction, like a perfectly smooth fog. But in 2004, a team of researchers using a mathematical tool called a spherical Mexican hat wavelet found something that didn't fit the pattern. They identified a region in the southern sky centered on the constellation Eridanus that was anomalously impossibly cold. It is known simply as the cold spot. The cold spot is not just a tiny dot, it is 5 degrees across. To put that in perspective, it is 10 times the width of the full moon. In a universe born from the random quantum fluctuations of inflation, a spot this large and this cold should essentially not exist. The probability of such a feature occurring by pure chance is estimated at less than 2%. It is a massive, frigid void that sits like a bruise on the very edge of our visible world. Mainstream science has tried to explain the cold spot away using a supervoid, a vast region of space at a redshift of 0.2 that is mostly empty of matter. The theory is that as the ancient light of the CMB passed through this void, it lost energy through the integrated Sachs-Wolf effect, arriving at our telescopes looking colder than the rest of the sky. But there is a problem. The supervoid doesn't explain the whole story. Even after accounting for the energy loss, the cold spot is still too cold. The numbers don't add up. If it isn't an empty void, then what is it? Some physicists believe we are looking at the first structural crack in the screen of our projection. They propose that the cold spot is a collision scar, the site where our bubble universe physically slammed into a neighboring universe in the first fraction of a second after the Big Bang. In the chaos of the eternal foam, our expanding bubble wasn't alone. It was part of a crowded, competitive environment. When two bubbles collide, they deposit energy asymmetrically, leaving a distinctive circular imprint on the temperature pattern of the sky. When we look at the cold spot, we aren't just looking at cold gas. We are looking at the dent, left by a cosmic fender bender that happened 13 billion years ago. We are seeing the fingerprints of a beyond that is far more crowded and violent than we ever imagined, but the cold spot is only the beginning. As we zoom out from that single bruise and look at the largest scales of the entire CMB map, we find an even more unsettling anomaly. When you break the sky down into its fundamental harmonic components, the quadrupole and the octopole, you expect to find them pointing in random directions. Inflation is supposed to be isotropic. It shouldn't have a favorite side. But they aren't random. The largest waves of temperature in our universe are aligned with each other. More disturbingly, they are both aligned with the ecliptic plane, the path of the Earth's orbit around the Sun. This anomaly was so statistically improbable, so evil in its implication, that the entire universe seemed to care about our tiny solar system, that it was dubbed the axis of evil. The probability of this alignment occurring by chance in a random field is less than 1%. It suggests that there is a preferred direction in the cosmos, a directional bias that shouldn't exist if our universe started as a uniform explosion. Critics have argued that the axis of evil is just foreground contamination, a result of light from our own galaxy or solar system leaking into the maps. But the anomaly has persisted through 3 generations of satellites, COBE, WMAP, and Planck. Even after the most rigorous cleaning of the data, the axis remains. It suggests that the stretching of inflation wasn't perfectly symmetric. It hints that during our birth, our bubble was being tugged, warped, or squeezed by external forces in the bulk. The axis of evil isn't an error in the telescope. It's a directional scar, a memory of a time when our reality was being influenced by something massive on the outside. This leads us to the most controversial and model-breaking evidence of all: dark flow. In 2008, a team at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center, led by Alexander Kashlinsky, began studying the motion of hundreds of galaxy clusters across 2.5 billion light-years of space. According to the standard model of cosmology, as the universe expands, these clusters should be moving away from us in a uniform, predictable way. But that isn't what they found. They discovered a massive bulk flow, a collective drift where thousands of galaxies are screaming across the universe at speeds of up to 1,000 kilometers per second. They aren't just moving with the expansion, they are being pulled. And they are all heading toward the same destination, a specific patch of the sky between the constellations of Centaurus and Hydra. This discovery sent shockwaves through the scientific community because there is nothing in the observable universe that can account for this motion. There is no supercluster, no massive black hole, and no known structure large enough to exert such a titanic gravitational tug across billions of light years. The only way to explain dark flow is to admit that there is something massive lurking beyond the edge of our visibility, something so gargantuan that its reach extends past the rendering boundary of the CMB and pulls on the galaxies inside our bubble. Think about the implications. We have been taught that the universe is homogeneous and isotropic, that matter is distributed evenly and everything is balanced. But dark flow suggests that the beyond is not uniform. It suggests that just past our horizon, the rules change. There is a boogeyman out there, a source of gravity so immense that it makes our 2 trillion galaxies look like a handful of leaves being caught in a draft. How can something beyond the edge of the universe still pull on us? The answer lies in the pre-inflationary loophole. Before inflation happened, when our entire universe was smaller than an atom, everything was in causal contact. If there was a particularly dense section of the wider bulk or a neighboring bubble nearby, it could have tugged on our patch of matter before we were separated by the super-expansion of the Big Bang. Inflation then pushed that massive neighbor trillions of light years away, effectively putting it behind a wall of light. But because things in motion tend to remain in motion, our galaxies are still drifting from that initial pull. We are seeing the residual momentum of a cosmic attraction that happened before time as we know it even began. The existence of dark flow, the axis of evil, and the cold spot creates a narrative that mainstream documentaries often ignore, the narrative of the failed uniformity. We were told we lived in a perfect, flat, balanced bubble. But these three clues suggest that our bubble is dented, biased, and being pulled sideways. We are not an isolated laboratory, we are a fragment of a larger, messy, and competitive ecosystem. This realization is the ultimate failed escape attempt. We wanted to reach the edge to see the beyond, but the beyond has already reached in and touched us. The cold spot is where it bumped us. The axis of evil is how it warped us. And dark flow is how it is still pulling us toward it. We are the prisoners of a horizon that is being tugged by an invisible warden. When we look at these anomalies, we have to ask, what does the outside actually look like? If the beyond isn't just more empty space, then what is the source of the gravity pulling on Centaurus and Hydra? In the framework of brain cosmology, it could be the bulk presence of a neighboring membrane that is currently drifting too close to ours. We are feeling the footsteps of a neighbor through a wall we didn't know existed. In the framework of the eternal foam, it could be a megabubble so vast that its internal structures make our entire observable universe look like a grain of sand. The horror of Chapter 8 is the realization that our magic trick universe might actually be a victim of a larger cosmic game. We look at the 93 billion light-year sphere and feel like masters of the kingdom, unaware that we are drifting in a current we can't see, toward a destination we can't avoid because of a collision we can't remember. The scars of collision prove that the beyond is real, it is massive, and it is not silent. But as we look at these bruises, we start to notice a pattern in the way the universe is structured. The anomalies don't just point to other bubbles, they point to a recursive, repeating nature of reality. If our universe is a bubble being pulled by a larger mass, what is that mass? Could it be that every universe we see is actually tucked inside something else? This leads us to the most claustrophobic realization of our entire investigation. In the next chapter, we will leave the foam and the collisions behind to explore the fractal prison, the theory that there is no final outside, only a recursive loop of nesting doll universes where every black hole we create is the birth of a new reality. And we ourselves are living inside a black hole at the center of a larger parent universe. We have found the scars on the wall. Now it's time to see if the wall is just the interior of a much larger cell. Tonight, we uncover the claustrophobic possibility that every attempt to find the edge of our universe is merely an attempt to escape the gravitational throat of a black hole in a much larger reality. We have spent our journey looking for a container, a final, ultimate outside that would finally make sense of our existence. We looked for a wall of fire, a multidimensional ocean, and an eternal foam of bubbles, all in the hope that if we just traveled far enough or looked deep enough, we would find the edge of the cage. But what if the cage has no door? What if the reason we can't find the outside is because we are living in a recursive loop where every ending is actually a beginning and every edge is just the interior surface of something else? Imagine a world where zooming out forever doesn't lead to freedom, but to a perfect repetition of the very prison you tried to leave. We are about to confront the most unsettling realization in all of cosmology, the fractal prison, a reality of infinitely nested universes where we are not the masters of space, but the inhabitants of a single cosmic cell that is itself inside another, and another, and another ad infinitum. To understand the true nature of our prison, we have to revisit the eternal foam we explored in the previous chapter. We were told that inflation is eternal, that it is a self-reproducing factory of infinities where new bubbles are born every second. It was a comforting idea in a strange way, because eternal implies that the universe has always been there, a steady-state sea of potential that requires no explanation. But in 2003, three physicists, Arvind Borde, Alan Guth, and Alexander Vilenkin, published a theorem that destroyed this comfort. It is known as the Borde-Guth-Vilenkin (BGV) theorem, and its conclusion is a mathematical death sentence for the idea of a past eternal universe. The BGV theorem states that any universe that has, on average, been expanding throughout its history cannot be infinite in the past. It must have a past-time boundary. It doesn't matter what the laws of physics are inside the bubbles or how the inflaton field behaves. The math is cold and absolute. It says that if you run the movie of the universe backward, you eventually hit a wall that you cannot cross. This means that even the eternal foam had to start somewhere. It means the screaming we talked about in Chapter 3 had a beginning. And if it had a beginning, we are forced to ask the most dangerous question in science. What was the trigger? This is where the recursive realities model enters our investigation, and it does so by looking at the most terrifying objects in the sky: black holes. In mainstream science, a black hole is a graveyard, a place where matter is crushed into a singularity and information is lost forever. But a growing number of theoretical physicists are beginning to see them as something else entirely. They are looking at the math of general relativity and seeing a loophole. When a massive star collapses, it creates a region of space so warped that even light cannot escape. This is the event horizon, the boundary of the whole. But according to the theory of black hole genesis, the matter doesn't just stop at the center. Instead, the intense energy of the collapse triggers a localized burst of expansion, a reheating event that looks exactly like a Big Bang. From our perspective, looking at a black hole in our own galaxy, we see a dark, impenetrable sphere. But to an observer inside that black hole, the collapse was the Big Bang of their own universe. This means that every black hole we have ever mapped, the supermassive giant at the center of the Milky Way, the 1,000 solar mass voids scattered across our spiral arms, could be the umbilical cord to a daughter universe that we will never see. And the horrifying corollary is that the same logic applies to us. Our Big Bang, the event we have spent billions of dollars trying to understand, was not a singular explosion of nothingness. It was the other side of a black hole collapse in a larger parent universe. Our first wall, the cosmic microwave background that we studied in Chapter 1, isn't just a wall of light. It is the interior surface of a four-dimensional event horizon. We are living inside a black hole. This creates a narrative of cosmological natural selection, a biological-like evolution of the cosmos. In this model, universes aren't random accidents. They are part of a reproductive ecosystem. Universes that have physical laws that favor the production of many black holes, universes that are flat, stable, and rich in matter, are the ones that reproduce most successfully. They birth the most daughter universes which inherit those same successful laws with slight mutations. Our universe, with its knife-edge precision of omega, isn't a miracle. It is just a highly successful species in a multiverse of failures. We exist because our parent universe was an expert at making black holes, and we, in turn, are currently populating our sky with the seeds of our own children. But when you combine the BGV theorem's requirement for a beginning with this black hole genesis model, you arrive at the fractal prison. It is the nesting doll horror. Imagine zooming out from the Earth. You see the solar system, then the galaxy, then the local cluster, then the observable bubble. Most documentaries stop there. They tell you you've reached the edge of the map. But in the fractal prison, As you approach the 46 billion light-year boundary, you realize you aren't hitting the end of space. You are hitting the event horizon of the black hole that contains us. If you could somehow cross that horizon and look upward, you would see the parent universe. You would see stars and galaxies on a scale so massive that our entire observable sphere looks like a single microscopic particle of dust. But then you look at those parent galaxies and realize they too are swirling around a center. They are part of a larger parent universe, and that universe is inside another. The beyond is not a void. It is a recursive repetition of cosmic structures, a fractal geometry where every outside is just the inside of a larger cell. There is no final outside. There is no ultimate container. There is only the repetition of the prison scaled up to infinity. This is the ultimate failed escape attempt. Every time humanity moves the boundary of reality, we find that the new wall is just as impenetrable as the last. We found the atmosphere, then the stars, then the galaxies, and now we find the horizons. But the pattern is always the same. Every answer is just a more sophisticated prison wall. We are like a character in a computer game who has hacked the code to see what lies beyond the map, only to find that the beyond is just a larger copy of the same level. The horror of the fractal prison is the realization that freedom is a linguistically meaningless term in an infinite structure. If reality is recursive, then asking what is beyond the edge is like asking what lies north of the North Pole. Space itself is the definition of the prison. We instinctively imagine a container because our primitive biological minds can't handle the idea of endless nesting. But the math tells us that the container is just another layer of the content. This leads to the conceptual instability of our own identity. If our universe is a daughter in a lineage of black holes, then our laws of physics, the very things we use to measure reality, are just the mutated remnants of a parent code. We aren't special, we are a side effect of a reproductive ecosystem. Life isn't the point of the universe. Life is just the mold that grows on the walls of the cosmic reproductive organs. We are living in a fragment of a unified whole that has been shattered into a trillion nesting dolls, and we have the audacity to think we are at the center of it all. The scars of collision we studied in Chapter 8 take on a new, darker meaning in the fractal prison. Those bruises on the CMB, the cold spot and the axis of evil, might not be collisions with other bubbles. They might be the internal artifacts of the parent black hole's collapse. We are seeing the turbulence of our birth, the memory of the star that died to create our room. We are looking at the smudges on the glass of our cell, trying to infer the world outside by studying the dirt on the interior of the window. And here is the most claustrophobic implication. If we are inside a black hole, we are structurally forbidden from ever leaving. You cannot travel up the umbilical cord. The same gravity that pulls matter into the hole in the parent universe is what keeps us pinned to the 3 dimensions of our brain. Every time we try to reach the edge, the expansion of space, driven by the dark energy that might just be the suction of the parent's gravity, pushes the edge further away. We are being digested by a geometry that we can't even see. The fractal prison destroys the concept of uniqueness even more thoroughly than the eternal foam. In a recursive loop, not only are there infinitely many versions of us in other bubbles, but there are infinitely many versions of our entire lineage. Somewhere above us, a version of humanity is watching a version of their universe fade into a black hole. Somewhere below us, inside the singularities of our own stars, new civilizations are being birthed, looking up at their own CMB and wondering what lies beyond the edge, unaware that their God is a dying star in the Milky Way. We are the product of an infinite redaction. The physics that allowed us to exist, the inflation that smoothed our space, the magic trick of omega, is the very same physics that locked us in this recursive room and threw away the key. We are survivors of a cosmic shredding, living in the only shard where the numbers happen to balance, but that shard is just one scale of an infinite fractal. As we sit here, mapping our 2 trillion galaxies, we have to accept that we are nearing the end of the mystery, but it is not the ending we wanted. We wanted a shore. We wanted a horizon that led to an ocean. Instead, we found a mirror. We found that the more we look outward, the more we find ourselves looking into the mechanics of our own isolation. The fractal prison tells us that the search for the edge of the universe is ultimately the search for the limits of ourselves. But there is one final layer to this investigation. If we are trapped in a recursive loop of nesting dolls, and if every edge is just a perspective, then what happens when the movie finally ends? What happens at the end of time, when the last black hole evaporates and the last galaxy fades? In our final chapter, we will look at the mirror at the end of time. The theory that the end of one universe is the Big Bang of the next, and that the ultimate answer to what is beyond is the one thing we never expected, us seen from the other side. We have found the prison. Now it's time to find the exit that leads back to the beginning. We have traveled to the ends of light, to the edges of the higher dimensional bulk, and through the recursive loops of the fractal prison, searching for the container that holds our reality. We have chased the beyond with telescopes and equations, only to find that every time we reach a wall, it is either a mirror, a bruise from a collision, or a rendering limit designed to hide the truth of our isolation. But tonight, our investigation reaches its final, most unsettling destination. We are leaving the world of space behind entirely to look at the geometry of time itself. We are about to discover that the edge we have been hunting isn't a place in the distance, but a moment in our future. We are entering the mirror at the end of time, a final realization where the death of the universe and its birth are revealed to be the exact same event, viewed from different sides of a cosmic glass. To understand the end, we first have to witness the ultimate erasure of our reality. As we explored in Chapter 4, the shrinking window of dark energy is already deleting the cosmos, galaxy by galaxy. In about 100 trillion years, the last stars will burn out, leaving the universe a graveyard of white dwarfs, neutron stars, and black holes. Trillions of years after that, even these cold embers will be gone, swallowed by the black holes that have grown into absolute masters of the dark. For an unimaginably long period, the black hole era, the only things that will exist are these gravitational abysses, slowly leaking Hawking radiation into the void. Eventually, even the black holes will evaporate. The universe will become a featureless cooling sea of dilute photons and lonely electrons, drifting in an expanse so vast that the distance between any two particles is measured in trillions of light years. This is the heat death, the state of maximum entropy, where time seems to lose its meaning because nothing ever happens. In the standard model of cosmology, this is where the story ends, a slow, eternal fade into a boring, frozen nothingness. But it is here, at the absolute limit of exhaustion, that Sir Roger Penrose identified a mathematical, spectacular realization that mirrors Alan Gough's discovery of inflation. This is the core of conformal cyclic cosmology, or CCC. Penrose realized that in this far future universe, something strange happens to the physics of scale. When the black holes have evaporated and all matter has decayed, the universe is filled only with massless particles like photons. For a particle with mass, time is a real ticking constraint, but for a massless particle, time does not exist. A photon does not experience the passage of years. It does not know how far it has traveled. More importantly, without mass, there is no way to define a ruler. Scale is a property of matter. If there are no atoms to provide a standard of length, the universe forgets how big it is. In this state of massless emptiness, the infinite, stretched-out future of a dead universe becomes mathematically indistinguishable from the infinitely small, hot, and dense Big Bang of a new one. The geometry becomes conformal, meaning it only cares about angles and shapes, not size. From the perspective of the physics, the Big Chill of the end is identical to the Big Bang of the beginning. The universe reaches its absolute limit of expansion, and then, in a geometric reset that defies our 3D intuition, it rescales. The infinite vacuum of the dead universe becomes the starting source code for the next. The beyond we have been searching for is not an ocean outside our bubble. It is the previous bubble, seen through the mirror of a new beginning. Every Big Bang is just the thermalization of the previous universe's ghost. This means that the cosmic microwave background, the first wall we have been obsessing over since Chapter 1, is not just a wall of fire. It is a transition zone. It is the smudge left behind by the death of our parent. This is the ultimate failed escape attempt. We wanted to reach the edge to see the outside, but the search was doomed from the start because we are part of a closed temporal loop. When we look at the CMB and see the cold spot, or the axis of evil, we might be looking at the final dying breaths of a previous eon imprinted onto our reality like a photograph taken through a dusty lens. We are living in a fragment of a unified whole that has been shattered and rebuilt an infinite number of times. But this realization leads us to a deeper, more psychological conclusion. Why do we ask the question, what is beyond, in the first place? Why are we so possessed by the need for a container? The sources suggest that the edge of the universe is not a physical problem, but a biological one. Our brains evolved in a world of limits. We understand rooms, we understand horizons, and we understand skins. We instinctively assume that everything must exist inside something else. This is why we invent the bulk, the foam, and the nesting dolls. They are all just more sophisticated ways of giving the universe a shore to break upon. We fear both endings and endlessness, and so we create boundaries to give our existence meaning. The true beauty and horror of this investigation is the final realization that the wall and the observer were created together. We are not observers who accidentally find ourselves in a universe with a boundary. We are the product of the very thing that hides reality from us. The cosmic concealment of inflation, the smoothing of space that hid 99% of existence, was the prerequisite for our birth. If the universe hadn't ironed itself flat, if it hadn't quarantined us behind the 4 fake horizons, gravity would have been too chaotic, or the energy too high, for life to ever arise. Our ignorance is not a flaw in our science, it is a structural necessity for our existence. The edge exists specifically to ensure that here can be stable. We are the survivors of a cosmic shredding who live in the only shard where the numbers happen to balance. To ask what is beyond the wall is to ask for the one thing that would make our lives impossible. The beyond is a graveyard of broken code and lethal physics that the universe dumped over the horizon to make our room quiet enough for us to think. We have spent this documentary treating the edge as a mystery to be solved, a detective case where we hunt for matched circles and collision scars. But the final clue is the most humbling. The observable universe is not a description of what exists. It is a description of what the physics of space-time permits us to reach. The boundary is not made of matter or stone, it is made of causality. It is a property of the relationship between us and the infinite. When you look up at the night sky and see the blackness between the stars, you are not looking at a void. You are looking at the limitations of your own being. You are looking at the rendering boundary that moves as you move, a shadow that follows you wherever you go. We feel like the masters of all we survey because we have mapped 2 trillion galaxies, but we are actually like a group of bacteria on a grain of dust, marveling at how clean our clean room is, unaware that the rest of the building is a construction site. As we sit in our cosmically fortunate moment, we have the rare privilege of seeing the fingerprints of the beyond before they are deleted forever. We can see the mirror at the end of time through the math of Penrose and the light of the CMB, but the ending of this story refuses closure. Every answer we have found, the bulk, the foam, the fractal, simply relocates the mystery one step further back. If there is a previous universe in the cyclic loop, where did the first one come from? If we are in a recursive doll, who made the first doll? The final thesis is this: reality may be structurally incapable of ever reaching an edge. We are trapped in an architecture of infinite realities where the outside is a linguistically meaningless term. We are part of a self-sustaining reproductive factory of infinities that has no need for an observer, and yet we are the observer, the only part of the system that can look at the bars and realize they are there. The search for the edge of the universe is ultimately the search for the limits of ourselves. We find the wall, we find the loop, and we find the mirror, only to realize that we were never looking at the world. We were looking at the mechanics of our own isolation. The universe did not grow too large to see. It grew in a way that guaranteed we never would. Tonight, as we close our investigation, look again at the stars. Know that beyond them lies 32 sextillion galaxies you will never touch. Know that beyond your horizon the inflation field is still screaming, carving off new big bangs in every direction. And know that at the very end of time, when the last photon has faded and the scale of reality has been forgotten, the mirror will flip. The end will become the beginning. The dead infinite will rescale into a new, hot point of potential. And another observer in another bubble will look up at their first wall and wonder, just as you do, what really exists on the other side. The wall was not built to frustrate us. It was built by the same process that built us. We are the products of the darkness, the children of the concealment, and the only witnesses to a cosmic magic trick that hides 99% of reality just to give us a place to call home. The beyond is not out there. The beyond is the very reason we are here.